Coming from South Carolina, we've got voter ID, and I'm assuming Texas is the same way. Do y'all need IDs to buy alcohol when you're purchasing at the store?
Yes, to be sure that you are capable of doing that.
Right. Do you need an ID in Texas to buy cigarettes?
You can't buy them unless you're at least 21.
But do you have to show an ID to buy cigarettes?
You have to show an ID.
Do you need an ID when you're getting a job and trying to get on payroll in Texas?
Yes.
Do you need an ID to go to the pharmacy and get a prescription in Texas?
It depends on the prescription.
But do you need an ID for some prescriptions
Yes,
in Texas?
Yes.
Do you need an ID to get Social Security services in Texas?
You do.
Do you need an ID to rent an apartment in Texas?
Yes.
Do you need an ID if you're going to buy a house and finance it via a mortgage in Texas?
Yes.
Do you need an ID in Texas if you're going to board an aircraft and fly commercial?
Yes.
Did you fly commercial or fly a private jet on the way to D.C.?
A chartered plane.
Do you have to show an ID when you fly in a private charter jet?
Yes.
I wouldn't know. I've never flown on one. So, did you need an ID to get in the building here today?
Yes.
Do you need an ID in Texas to open a bank account?
Yes.
To cash your check if you're working. Do you know, Representative Thompson, what percentage of blacks in Texas, black and brown African Americans, are registered to vote?
Oh, a huge percentage.
70%. Do you know what percentage of African Americans, black and brown Texans have voted on average or in the last election?
About 64%.
Correct. Do you know how many whites are registered to vote in Texas?
Far more than African Americans.
72%. You have 70% of blacks in Texas who are registered to vote. You have 72% of whites in Texas who are registered to vote. Do you know the percentage of whites who turned out to vote in recent elections?
I want to say over 50-some%.
65%.
Yeah.
Do you know what percentage of Hispanics are registered to vote in Texas?
No, I do not.
63%. Do you know what percentage of Hispanics voted in the last election?
I think it was over 40%.
53%. Hispanics are not voting in as high numbers as blacks and whites in Texas. Do you know the percentage of Democrats that support voter ID?
Would you repeat your question?
Do you know the number or percentage of Democrats who support voter ID in this country?
I do not, but I don't think it's a whole lot.
72%. Do you know the number of black and brown and African Americans in this country who support voter ID?
No.
75%. Do you know the number of Hispanics that support voter ID in this country?
No.
81%. Do you know where the state of Texas is ranked with black voter turnout in this country?
Would black voters turn out?
Mm-hmm. Do you know where Texas is ranked?
Oh, about 44%.
The latest numbers that I read this morning was that Texas is ranked 10th. Do you know where Texas is ranked? So then top 10 in the country. Do you know where Texas is ranked with women voters?
Oh, way up in the 50s.
In the bottom third of this country. So I would argue that Texas has a more difficult problem with getting women out to vote than black and brown and African Americans. Thank you, and I yield back.
You said it all. So I have an interesting question, just as, a former member of the Senate, when I saw those out of control, crazy people in the Senate going through the desks. I really was having an out-of-body experience at the time, and you were right there. And I felt guilty that I was safe and away. But here's the question I have that I think not enough people think about. A miracle happened because you made sure the certification of the presidential election continued. This is not given enough stress. And were there those around the Congress who suggested putting that certification aside? Because it's my theory, if you hadn't done that, I don't know where we'd be today.
No.
So can you give us a little inside color as to, how you made that decision and who, if you can tell us, who was helpful in that?
Well, let me just say, the main thing we were doing when we were at the undisclosed location is pounding away at why is the National Guard not there? And the administration really withheld the okay for the National Guard to go. I don't care what they say. They were, it takes a lot, and it's harder to do, and I got to talk to my boss and all that kind of thing, from the Secretary of the Army versus the Secretary of Defense, all of them acting Secretary of the Army. And that was what Chuck and I, and we were just so concerned. I was also concerned that the Vice President was still on the property. They did not take him off the property. So when I was talking to him, I said, I'm very concerned that you're still on the campus. And he basically said, the security, the Secret Service, that's different. We had the Capitol Police, they had the Secret Service. They thought it would cause too much of a thing to have the entourage of the Vice President leave when they were seeking him out. We kind of left a little more confidentially than the Vice President's motorcade would be. So that was, he was very smart to stay. I'm not sure, and you'll have to ask him, whether the Secret Service wanted him to stay there or they wanted him to go. But he knew if he left, there was probably no coming back. But anyway, so that was one piece of it. The other part of it was, again, pounding away. Where's the National Guard? Why aren't they there? Why aren't they there? Why don't you okay it? Well, it takes a lot. It was really weird. And now they make up all kinds of things like they were there. They weren't. But the main decision was, we're going back. We're going back. And people said, well, we could bring all the members over here to, now remember it's COVID, and so you have to be spaced and all that. You can bring them over here and then we can do the whole process. I said, we're going to the floor of the House. Chuck Schumer was very much that way. And to his credit, Mitch was okay with that as well. He wasn't a problem. So the three of us were in agreement. But in the course of the evening, don't tell anybody I told you this, okay? This is just between each one of us.
And everybody online and the press who's reporting on it is good.
In the course of the evening, you're going to love this, Mitch goes over to Chuck and says, congratulations, Chuck. He realized that the votes of the day before, January 5th, had now proven that Chuck was going to be the majority leader of the Congress. Now, just as an aside, now we'll get back to this. So we said to the security, we're coming back. We're coming back. Now, what's the earliest time we can come back? It doesn't mean, there's still, blood and glass and everything else on the floor and stuff, but we're coming back. And that was they could have said, well, you could just do it here. I said, no, the world has to see that the Capitol is operational and that we are in the Capitol as we engage in the peaceful transfer of power in terms of the Electoral College. And that was pretty exciting, I have to admit. And the members were very grateful for that, even though they were the ones most at risk, because, I have so much security. They have security, but not Speaker. Speaker's second in line to the presidency. I mean, it's, God, never happened, but nonetheless, you get commensurate security in that regard. So these members were very courageous to agree that we would go back and do this in light of what had happened earlier in the day. But what's really sad about it, and you can tell anybody this, what was really sad about it, Barbara, was that, Senator, was that, that when that happened, overwhelmingly, the Republicans in the House voted against accepting the results of the Electoral College. That was heartbreaking. It's one thing for a gang of whatever you want to call them to come in here instigated by the President of the United States It's another thing for members of Congress to vote against the peaceful transfer of power.
Well, thank you for that